Resistance liberals' favorite comedians are teaming up to start a podcast. Some people have objected to this conflagration of liberal greats, but it seems to be for a good cause. Stephen Colbert, Jimmy Fallon, Jimmy Kimmel, Seth Meyers, and John Oliver are teaming with Spotify for a podcast called Strike Force 5, a limited series podcast discussing the WGA writer's strike, and proceeds will go to staffers on each of their shows. Let's take a listen to the promo.
One more time, Jimmy.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Jimmy Fallon.
I'm Stephen Colbert.
I'm Jimmy Kimmel. I thought when you said Jimmy, you meant me, Jimmy, but you meant Jimmy.
I always mean you.
But when you say Seth Meyers, who do you mean?
I mean John Oliver.
It's the five of us together for maybe an hour a day.
Strike Force 5 is the name of our podcast. Subscribe to it now.
Spotify or wherever else you get your podcasts.
But Spotify, you.
I'm not sure they've mastered the art form yet.
It is an John art Oliver. form. John Oliver had me there at the end.
Sorry to blast you with the F word. This is a family show, producers.
I do agree with you that many people think that they can do a successful podcast just because they're famous. It didn't work out for Barack Obama and Bruce Springsteen. I don't think everybody has the juice. I will say comedians do tend to fare better in this field than other folks.
Because they can word talk for long, get the
They can riff on each other. They can have chemistry and the like. I do think it's interesting that you keep getting these. It's not that there's a problem with it, but these podcasts that are like a bunch of white guys that they have duplicate names, like this is a criticism of Pod Save America, that they're all Johns and you can't tell them apart. Here, there's multiple Jimmys in these podcasts. But, you know, people were melting down over this. People were very upset.
Were they?
Yes.
I missed this one.
There were very many
Usually when people are melting down, it very quickly permeates my awareness, but I didn't see much.
People on the left were criticizing it for being libbish and cringe. People on the right were criticizing it for being
Those are some pretty
libbish and cringe
people. I mean, John Oliver is funny. I don't.
He's funny and incisive and has good politics.
Probably his politics.
Are you mad because he came after you that time?
I don't care about that. I don't hold a grudge. It's fine. People come after me daily. They come at me.
You made prime time.
That was over an Eliami clip.
Yeah. You and Eliami having a little.
It was unfortunate because it made it look like I was some like arch right-wing person on policing issues, which I am if you put me next to Eliami, who's the furthest left person on criminal justice stuff. On the history of the world. No, it was not. It was about police stuff.
Okay.
In any normal spectrum of people, I am not like an extremist for militarizing the police or something.
Most certainly you aren't. I think the real tragedy of that clip going viral is that our background was out that day, and it looked really raggedy.
I was thrilled about that. Looked like we were, just
a low-rent organization. Yeah, so I do think that John Oliver has good commentary. I know that people really dislike Jimmy Fallon. They don't like that super positive, why is he always laughing, why is he always singing? I see that critique of him. I like laughing and singing. I like a little bit of a cabaret situation on my late night shows. It doesn't bother me. It's innocent. I think we need some more of that in this world.
I'm not a consumer of late night. I will watch John Oliver sometimes because he is funny. I'm not a consumer of late night stuff at all. Like if there's a good clip, it'll make it to my, I'll watch it if it's online, but I don't watch a lot of late night. I don't find it that funny.
Well, this is part and parcel of this bigger argument that's been going on where conservatives have been saying that liberals aren't funny anymore because they're too woke. And that is a real swing and a change from what used to be considered to be common knowledge back in, let's say, the Bush era, where it was the height of Jon Stewart. And the joke was that conservative attempts to compete just didn't rate very highly. And
a lot of conservative humor is cringe. I think the idea, though, is that the liberal perspective, the elite liberal perspective has become so mainstream that it just doesn't. It's not transgressive. The kind of humor they tell, because the kind of humor they do is like well in keeping with CDC guidelines or something. I'm specifically thinking of, when Jon Stewart broke through during that Colbert appearance, where like he seemed so alarmed that Stewart was giving some.
Those are two liberals. Having that conversation.
Stewart is more of an outside-the-box thing.
Sure, but he is in no way conservative. So those are two left-leaning people on both sides of that. So it's an interesting argument to make. In fact, we have a clip here of Democratic presidential candidate RFK Jr. making a similar kind of critique of left humor. Let's take a watch.
It was weird what happened to the You know, I'm sure you noticed this, that all these comedians stopped being funny at the beginning of COVID. All the people who we laughed at for 20 years, and none of them were funny anymore because they weren't allowed to laugh at what was happening, what was really happening. They all had to go along with the narrative. It was shocking. You were the first guy who was being funny about it. You know, the humor is such an important part of change and criticism and political dissent. As for Jimmy Kimmel and Colbert and, you know, all of those guys, they went dead. What happened?
Fauci said that if hospitals get any more overcrowded, they're going to have to make some very tough choices about who gets an ICU bed. That choice doesn't seem so tough to me. Vaccinated person having a heart attack? Yes, come right on in. We'll take care of you. Unvaccinated guy who gobbled horse goo? Rest in peace, Wheezy.
I feel like they let down comedy. No, I know Jimmy Kimmel. He was a sweetheart of a guy. I always thought he was a nice guy. He was nice to me. And so it was a heartbreak to see that.
Yeah, look, I think there's a lot of truth, honestly, to that observation. That's what I was getting at before we played that clip. Obviously, RFK Jr. and Jimmy Dore are people who substantively disagree with what Jimmy Kimmel's of the world had to say about COVID. So maybe they don't find it funny because they don't agree with it. I don't really agree with. I'm more in their camp on those things as well. So, but I think I can usually appreciate humor when I don't agree with that. I think John Oliver is quite funny, even though I really don't agree with him, and he's made fun of me.
Yeah, I don't. There's this formulation about punching up versus punching down, which people have used. I'm sure you do.
Loathe entirely.
I'm sure you do, but I do think that, like most things, top down is the way to have an analysis, not left right. And there are plenty of conservative comedians that I think are perfectly funny, but I don't think making a joke at the expense of someone who has a physical disability or mental, I personally don't think it's funny. I think that humor requires an edginess, and if you are beating up on somebody who always gets beaten up on by everyone all the time, there's nothing subversive or edgy about it. You know what I mean? If it's like, okay, I'm making a joke about, let's say, kicking a baby or something, there's something subversive about that because we have a cultural desire to protect babies.
So surprised to see you joking about kicking babies. Anti-family Briahna over here.
Yeah, that's me. But that is not, I think, the correct way to look at the up-down thing. I think that there are. It's very common to say, I don't like fat people. Mm-hmm. That's a very commonly internalized belief against in people who even know that they shouldn't say it out loud. So making a bunch of jokes about, LOL, she's fat. It's just not funny. There's nothing edgy about it. Everyone says stuff funny like that. But then you have to make it funny. Right. And I think that is the formulation.
Things like South Park and Family Guy find ways to make it funny, those kinds of things.
Yeah, because they're good at humor. Yeah. I would also say those are left-leaning human beings.
They do a lot of anti-PC. I don't know.
Yeah, but they're on the left.
Yeah.
This is what's so weird about the criticism. The left isn't funny anymore. Now, if the argument is that COVID isn't funny anymore, I will agree that there was some.
The South Park guys are left. I don't think that's true.
You think they're Republicans?
I think they're independent libertarians, but I don't know that they're Republicans. But they're not. I don't think they're left.
They're Canadian. Okay. All right. If the argument is that. So I just Googled a list of the top comedy tours. They all seem to be left-leaning people, or majority, et cetera. I think that's fine. If the critique is that COVID made things stop being funny, I think that I agree that there was a seriousness around COVID that made people not want to make any jokes about it. Perhaps understandably, when you had, 1 million people dying, more people dying, obviously, before we had vaccines, and a sense of fear about how far this thing could spread. But I do want to agree with him on one point, which is that horrible routine between the Cuomo brothers. Do you remember this? So everyone remembers the scandal of what it meant to have Governor Andrew Cuomo being interviewed by his brother and all of that. But then there was this kind of failed comedy routine with a giant swab.
That was not funny.
That I think was when that kind of thing sort of jumped the shark. So I will agree with that narrow criticism of COVID humor.
I looked it up. Apparently the South Park guys, they do identify somewhat as libertarians. Interesting.
Yeah, I'm a libertarian socialist, but that doesn't really mean a lot about my...
We're different spectrums of libertarians.
Politics.
The viewers might have picked up that we have an occasional difference in policy preferences, the two of us. That does it for our show today. Tomorrow on Rising, Craig Scott, a formerly incarcerated actor, will join us to discuss his experience with the First Step Act.
Be sure to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss any content. And for those of you who prefer to listen while you're on the go, we're now available anywhere you listen to podcasts.
We had a great time today. We hope you did as well, and we'll see you back here tomorrow.
Bye.